Western media outlets were not projecting the African story in a positive light, assert the president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's edition of the program Global Insider. We are looking at the place of communication in ensuring total transformation across the African continent amidst changing global dynamics. And today we are focusing on communication for development. This is stemming from a statement that the president of the African Development Bank and other stakeholders who attended the All Africa Media Leaders Summit in Nairobi to brainstorm on how they can define the trajectory for African media. Today's program, discursive program, now dives into the most pressing socio-economic issues shaping our global world and the place of communication. So it's actually focusing on the critical need for a transformation in media coverage to uplift Africa's global narratives, as highlighted by the president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina. The portrayal of Africa in the media often falls short of capturing the continent's true spirit and potential, perpetrating outdated stereotypes that actually hinder progress and investment. The clarion call was made during the 2024 All Africa Media Leaders Summit in Nairobi, Kenya, under the theme Re-engaging African Media in the Times of Critical Transformation, Economic and Human Development, Social Progress, Peace, security, and responsible, effective governance, according to report, cannot flourish without fair, accurate, and reliable information dissemination in this digital era. First, today, we look at how the media in Africa can communicate more for development, and also asking the question if the media represent that catalyst for real continental transformation. And you're on Global Insight at this moment. Welcome back. Is the media the catalyst we need for real continental transformation in a state of multilateralism? How can the media in Africa communicate properly to bring the African perspective to the global stage and, of course, ensure that this communication transcends into real development of every sphere across the continent? Welcome once more. Time to uncover the panel of experts that will give us highlight on this very important topic of today. Let's take you straight away to Zimbabwe. We are being joined by Dr. TENDAI Meya, who is the All Africa Chief Advisor and All Africa Media Leaders Summit Director. Hello to you, Dr. Tendai, and welcome to the Pan-African Television. It is for you media, and particularly on the platform Global Insight.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you. We were very, very honored to host Dr. Adesina at our All Africa Media Leaders Summit, where we had 48 countries' media leaders represented there to discuss how we can strengthen media to play its critical role in development in Africa. One of the most important things that Dr. Adesina said was the fact that we can now put a dollar sign on the importance of a positive narrative for Africa. He said that $74 billion is the amount that is actually spent on paying a risk premium on interest rates because of the risk that is grown and perceived from negative reporting, the old stereotypes. So this was about how do we portray a positive narrative for Africa that can allow us to be able to build our continent from a solid base.
Indeed, which is very much imperative in the times of changing dynamics. It is imperative to define the African perspective, and the media has the capacity or have the capacity to do so. To Algeria, let's to acknowledge the presence of Professor LAEED, who is in the Algiers University, Faculty of Information and Communication. And welcome to today's program, Dr. Professor LAEED.
Good afternoon, good evening, Clarice. Thank you for having me on your program. Of course, hello to your panel, and of course to my colleague and friend, Dr. TENDAI, with whom we shared this summit for the last time when we were in Nairobi. It was very fantastic, very exciting, very successful summit, and we reached a really very promising outcome. As Dr. TENDAI mentioned it, of course, we have to send my regards to all the leadership of ALLAfrica Media Leader Summit, especially Mamadou, my friend, and all people who are working towards the success of that conference. What I want to say only, of course, as Dr. TENDAI mentioned it, the excellent contribution of African Bank through Dr. Adesina was really pivotal and crucial to the success of this. And he made a very interesting and very positive speech regarding what the media should do to enable African economy taking off of the ground. Africa is full of human resources, full of natural resources, full of all facilities. What we need is just we have to get to work together and get it out of the ground. Unfortunately, one way or the other, the media in Africa is victim of a campaign of smearing, of disinformation, of propaganda, of everything from the world media. And as the world media is dominated by Western media, so we have, time has come that we should work together to remove all this negative picture about Africa, because for the last years or so, Africa was portrayed as a continent of disease, of poverty, of mismanagement, of coup d'etat, of corruption, and so forth. So time has come that we should, all African people, all African citizens, and all African politicians and decision makers, we should work together to remove this bad image. And I think through the All-African Media Summit, what they do, the summit, they have been aware of this challenge, and they are working towards improving this picture.
Okay, thank you, Professor LAEED, for the introductory statement, also acknowledging the presence of Alicia Clifton, who is a geopolitical analyst and also electrical power engineer. Welcome to the program, dear Ellis. And of course, we are looking at the place of communication in ensuring total development as the world is facing a lot of shift or dynamics in every sphere.
Thank you very much, Clarice. It's greetings to my my fellow panelists. It's my pleasure to participate in this discussion today. It is a very important subject matter of information and how should information be disseminated in order to represent an accurate truth as to really what is happening on the ground, as opposed to the creation of a narrative which presents a biased perspective that could then bend the truth into an image that it's not. So I'm very, very interested to hear more about what we would have been able to contribute on the basis of that speech that was given by the president of the Africa Development Bank. I do have on my side, looking at information as being a critical part of essentially formulating an idea that you can then create a strategy for investment. But of course, we have to ensure that it's not a marketing strategy, but when it comes to media, it's about how do you create free and fair, decentralized media that represents all the views and all the perspectives within each country of Africa. And then as a whole, we can look at it on a continental basis. But first, we have to understand, the importance of media inside of countries and ensuring that there are the relevant constitutions and investments being made in order to create a diverse and effective distribution of information that the populace inside of Africa and beyond will get a fair understanding of really what is happening inside of Africa and what opportunities are there for investment.
Indeed, it's about bringing the potentials of the African continent and ensuring that the global world acquaints itself with the realities of the continent. This is coming at a time that the world is facing an information war, and that is why we are here today to see how the various media personalities or media platforms, particularly in Africa, can be used to ensure a positive transformation of the continent rather than portray the continent in a negative perspective that will scare away investors. Before engaging into the analysis, understanding the stakes, let's revisit the few words of the president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, and I'll join you right after that.
Misinformation, stereotypes about Africa, and never-ending mantra of negative news has multiple effects. It negatively impacts the psyche, beliefs, and hopes of our youth. We had of them this morning, with the attendant result being a perception that their destiny lies somewhere else, but not on this continent. It's negative imageries impact on the psyche, the beliefs, the hopes of our youth. This negative imagery strongly impacts investor confidence, scares away capital from the continent, raises the risk profiles of countries, and worse, contributes to the so-called Africa risk premium that makes the cost of capital for investment in Africa 3 to 4 times higher than in other parts of the world. How many news agencies or editors have had their reporters research these biases and report on them to raise awareness about the cost of these biases in African countries? There is a deluge of misinformation on Africa, and it is increasing at an accelerated pace, driven by a digital revolution and the transition from mainstream media houses to social media. As business models radically shift away from conventional advertisement and subscription-driven models, the potential for even more negative and stereotypical biases will increase. Challenges the notions of media independence, transparency, and editorial control. With the fragmentation of the media ecosystem, has expanded the space for self-expression. That's good. But it has also created a new slew of problems, including foreign interference in shaping the African narrative. In an insightful piece by Africa's Center for Strategic Studies in March of this year, titled "Mapping a Surge of Disinformation in Africa," it states, and I quote, "Disinformation campaigns seeking to manipulate African information systems have surged nearly 4-fold since 2022, triggering destabilizing and anti-democratic consequences." End of quote. Dear friends, this rise of disinformation has been linked to efforts to influence and model up political discourse, incite civil unrest, build distrust between citizens and government, promote ethnic and religious divisions and accentuate divisions, as well as undermine economic, social, and political stability of countries.
and that was the president of the African Development Bank. Let's kick off with you, Mr. ELLIS. We've listened to Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, and you bear with me that this aligns so much with what stakeholders have been saying across Africa. Particularly, let me quote Abiy Ahmed, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, who noted that conquest and militarism has increased across the African continent because of the geopolitical competition, which has taken another dimension. And today we are looking at the misinformation or the communication war, which has increased patterning the African continent and the global world at large. From all of these facts presented, what can we hold of maybe the parameters or those elements that needs to maybe be put into the communication ecosystem of the continent at the moment of global dynamics to change quickly the narratives and give the continent what it deserves?
Well, information warfare that I think you're referring to is nothing new. We have seen throughout the 20th century, when the world was a bipolar world, when the ideological war between communism and capitalism, or the USSR versus America, we had propaganda that was essentially coming out of both sex. So this is not a new phenomena. The Goebbelian philosophy of propaganda, or the propaganda model, is that if you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes the truth. And so the individual or the entity, the country, or the interest with the loudest voice, and that is able to propagate throughout the world, will have significant ability to propagate a narrative. Now, what is happening inside of Africa is something more fundamental than just an information war. It's an ideological war. The ideological war, which is a globalized model versus a model of nation states essentially being able to govern sovereignly for themselves in their own interest and in the interest of their population. So this more fundamental warfare is obviously it's being fought in multiple dimensions, and of course, information warfare is one of the medium in which is extremely powerful in being able to shape the hearts and minds of individuals. But what I would say, importantly, is that truth requires little infrastructure. Well, not infrastructure, but resources to propagate. If you have a lie, you have to back that lie up repetitively. But what is really important is to ensure that information that is a truthful representation of the scenarios on the ground, especially as pertaining to sovereign governments and what their agenda is for development of their own countries, that they're able to vocalize in an effective manner the information to their populations on the ground, and ensuring that the populations of the ground buy into whatever that strategy is that the government wants to propagate as a part of its mandate, and to ensure that the relevant then institutional and economic environment is created that can essentially create good business. Now, this talk of loss of revenue or investment as a consequence of propaganda, yes, it's a phenomenon and it is true. Yeah. However, Africa represents the foremost important continent with regards to raw material. And when you look forward in terms of the strategy, the ESG strategies and the SDG strategies in terms of sustainable development goals, none of this can be achieved on an international level without access to African resources. So it is really a case of that there is demand for African resources, but I believe the onus is really on African governments to create an environment that is investment friendly, and then gives itself the megaphone that it needs, like what we see happening in Rwanda. Rwanda is a very small country, but it is in terms of percentage for the investment, it is fourth after South Africa, Morocco, I believe, and another. So what has happened in Rwanda? What has happened in Rwanda is that it's created an environment that is investment friendly. And then Kagame is able to go around the world and vocalize the successes of what is happening. And that, of course, then creates a very positive image of Rwanda as a place where you can do business. And then our brother here, the president, he talked about in terms of the perception of risk and how it affects interest rates. Now, I say that, you can talk up Africa all you want, but without dealing with the aforementioned things that I've mentioned in governments taking the responsibility in creating a very friendly environment for investment, it's then a marketing strategy. And then does that mean, therefore, that the narrative that is being created and propagated is a representation of the truth, that if I go there and I evaluate, the risks for investing, in developing like a power plant, for example, which is extremely cost intensive, will I be able to get a return on my investment? Or will the risks in terms of doing business in Africa be very challenging to overcome, and that will create cost overruns, and therefore it will affect my bottom line. And this is really very, very important. So I'll just stop there for the moment, and say that there are more fundamental things that need to be looked at and be considered. Yes, information is important, but let's look at the conduciveness of making investments on the ground in Africa.
Absolutely. It's about the conduciveness, and of course, who are those responsible of showcasing the conducive environment for the continent that will attract development. Coming back to you, Dr. Tendai, we've listened to the African Development Bank President and also Mr. Lisa, who have highlighted some very peculiarities as to the stakes involved as far as Africa environment and communication is concerned. And now with the All Africa Media Leaders Summit, and we see the media as one of those pillars that can help to ensure that the continent is being portrayed in a positive aspect. Now, how can we reframe now Africa's narrative, maybe taken from the declarations that we arrived at after the summit in Nairobi, Kenya? What are those major points or declarations that media personalities have arrived at to ensure that we redefine the narratives and see how we can make change the stereotypes, showcasing Africa's economic resilience and even innovation that will in turn attract investors? Dr. Tendai?
Yeah. I was muted, yes. Sorry, thank you very much for that. I think one of the most important things is to understand, why did we put together the All Africa Media Leaders Summit? Why do we need the media leaders to meet together? We started this way back in 2008 with Mr. Amadou Maktaba, getting media leaders together to try to strengthen and unite the media as Africa's fourth estate. This word that we use, the narrative, I actually don't like it. I don't think it's supposed to be a narrative. A narrative is like a story or a made-up thing. This is about telling the truth and making the truth profitable. They say that truth doesn't sell, and it's all about the negatives that sell. There are so many stories. 11 out of the world's 20 fastest growing countries are in Africa. This is not marketing. This is not about marketing. This is about putting the things that are most positive about our continent up front and center, to allow for this investment to come into the country and to allow for people to understand. President Adesina, when he spoke about a hybrid capital which was rated AAA by 3 global agencies and 8 times oversubscribed for African Development Bank. He asked the room, which was media leaders from 48 African countries, who had reported on this. There was only a handful who had actually reported on this. So when we do have the stories that bring confidence, that allow us to form a foundation for attracting FDI, we are not necessarily shouting about it. So at the end of the day, what do we need? We're only as strong as our fourth estate. We need to be in a situation where we have a strong and sustainable media, even within nations, speaking truth to power and keeping everybody honest. The media should be our watchdog. But when the media do not have sustainable businesses, the disaggregated business models are creating a loss of income. They're becoming weaker and weaker. That is something we have to do. That is something that all Africa would like to come together with the development banks, Afrixim, AFDB, corporate leaders, and fund media. A strong media is one that can actually make truth profitable, that can fact check, that can bring unbiased stories out. This is not about painting a rosy picture of Africa, but it's about bringing the real stories and the real potential of the African continent out.
Which is a very imperative to you, Professor LAEED. With all that has actually been said, how can you think or how can African media amplify local voices and perspective to counter the dominant narrative, I use the word again, often portrayed by mainstream media, as I highlighted by the president of the African Development Bank in his discourse?
Well, I really appreciated the doctor's Akinwumi Adesina discourse. Very interesting and very promising, especially when it comes from someone who is leading the African Bank, which means now businessmen, now people from the finance are aware of the importance of the media by being supportive of the media. They knew that we cannot invest in a country where the media are not helpful, where the picture and the image of Africa has to be improved. That is to say, first of all people in Africa, and especially the stakeholder, whether they are journalists, whether they are doctor, whether they are director, whether they are politician, whether they are civil society, they should be aware of the importance of the media. The media is a driving force to improve the image of one country. Doing business in very hostile climate is not possible. So the media can improve, can give you the right, can you do a better image of what is going on. The media, what is important in the media as the fourth, of course, state in any given country, that it should work together with institution, with legislation, with politician, with, of course, justice, and so forth. So, in other words, the media has to recover its independence, has to recover the audience and public trust. That's why the media should reflect the reality of what people concern, people worries, people hardship, and so forth. So the media should be an arm to improve, to disclose all the wrongdoings, and to avoid, of course, if we do nothing, as of course Dr. Adesina mentioned it, Africa, unfortunately, is the media in Africa is still playing a marginal role. We have to accept that. That's why we should have our right. We should reinvest the world media, because the media landscape it's still monopolized and occupied by Western countries, Western institutions, Western information communication enterprise, and that's why they are using, abusing, misusing all what is going when it comes to African media. So that is to say, if we do nothing, if Africa has to do nothing, and left the opportunity or the floor or to the others, we will be subject to all kinds of disinformation, all kinds of mismanagement, all kinds of smear campaign and manipulation. So African people, as I said to you, should be aware of the danger of not reflecting the reality. African media leader and, of course, actors like journalists should reflect the reality of people's everyday life. That's the best way to refrain, to stop from international interference, as once again Dr. Adesina said it. So I would say that there should be a matter of awareness, a matter of social responsibility, a matter of efficiency, and a matter of course, transparency. That's what we should have. Now, I think there is already a project within the African Union, a project of the creation of a commission for audiovisual and cinema. This is another step towards recovering African good image in the area of media, audiovisual, as well as the cinema. So now the whole continent, and through the leadership of the African Union and all different structures, whether regional economic commission and so forth, and other bodies, all of them now are aware of the necessity that African Union, through African Union, they should set up their media policy for the reason that I said it's a tool to recover our dignity, our image, our good picture in the whole world.
Absolutely. It's about redefining Africa's image and bringing it to the fore, particularly in the time of multilateralism and in the time that the continent seems to be more and more interesting to actually suppose global powers. Coming back to you, Mr. Ellis, while talking earlier on, you quite mentioned that information war is not a thing of today. It started even during the bipolar system, and we're moving gradually to the multipolar world, and you see the happenings regarding the shift in this system that is in the global world at the moment. So now, while we are maybe accentuating on this aspect of communication for development, I think in one of our platforms we've discussed how narratives being shaped by the Western media has even helped to distort information in the minds of Africans. Let's take a clear example. Back then in 2011 and in the days when the leadership of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, was existing, you used to see everywhere in the news, particularly in the mainstream media that actually occupied, the media space, referring to Gaddafi as a dictator, referring to leaders that do not actually abide with some of their policies as dictators. And this led to the eventual killing of the Libyan leader, Muammar Gaddafi. So now is how can we use these changes which have occurred, and now that the African media is gaining ground and we see lots and lots of media personalities, lots and lots of especially private media organs to help to disseminate information that will allow the people have confidence in their continent, and of course see the endowment of the continent, and also shape the narratives regarding maybe the political sphere as far as the communication space is concerned in Africa?
Absolutely, it's a very good question. Gaddafi, unfortunately, fell victim to an information campaign, war against him, and I think it's now Africa's responsibility, Africa's media's responsibility to rewrite into history the truth, because I don't really see many of the mainstream African media who are tackling this issue in wanting to represent Gaddafi and the scenario and that took place in Libya back in 2011 in the accurate way. The truth is Gaddafi was a proponent of the gold-backed dinar. because he understood that if you are to have an effective economy, you need to control your own currency. And so now we have situations of the CFA franc. That's why at the time Sarkozy, was one of the serious, proponents of the invasion of Libya, because the CFA franc is being controlled by the French exchequer or Ministry of Finance. Now, where is the African media who are tackling this issue, wanting to rewrite the truth rather than allowing for this lie to remain within the minds of even the youth of Africa that are coming up today? Are they receiving the truth? Are they understanding, the real reason behind Gaddafi, and a very principled reason, for that matter, in how he legitimately stood up for the rights of Africans in proposing this fantastic idea? So, at the end of the day, right, I think that we have to right the wrongs, tell the story of African development and all the wide range of perspectives. It's not a monolithic point of view. There is a very significant divergence points of view, multiplicity of points of view that exist even within the African continent. And so even within each country, there are debates taking place about what is the economic model that should create the best investment environment for external capital. So, all of these are meshed into one that starts from the point of what will be the constitution of this new media. Will there be a constitution that ensures that the multiplicity of perspectives and points of view that exist across the African continent is able to be vocalized, even points of view that are unpopular? Because at the end of the day, Africa needs a constitution. In America, they had advertised themselves as the land of the free, the home of the brave.
Yeah.
You can go there and create wealth. And so therefore, people started to do this not because there was a marketing campaign about America, but America had a constitution which said that, and it had an economic model that ensured there was a multiplicity of opportunities for different ideas to be funded, and then to plant the seed as a company and to then water that seed with capital, and then therefore having an environment where that product will then, if it is very appealing, will then have an environment where people have the capital to purchase, and therefore creating a velocity of capital inside of America. So America had also the First Amendment, and the First Amendment is that we have the right to have freedom of speech.
Sure.
So what we need is an architecture. And they need to talk about what architecture this new media will have, because we have to be aware that, if we do not take measures today to enshrine within the rules a constitution that protects freedom of speech, what we're going to have is a repeat of the same scenario that we've seen in the West, where back in the 1950s, you had a lot of media that would essentially voice all the perspectives from the right side of things all the way to the left side of things. But now what we're seeing as time has gone to infinity, the big fish is swallowing the small fish. And so now Reuters dominate, AP dominates. And if you go back to who is really funding them, it's the source of funding becomes BlackRock, for example. And so what is really important is to create an architecture that is taking the best of what already exists, which is freedom of speech as an amendment, as a part of a constitution that upholds these values. Otherwise, we're going to repeat the same mistakes, and we won't have the ability to have the divergence and the diversity of perspectives that exist, even throughout the African continent.
Okay, of course, it's about accentuating on the positive aspect of media plurality. Dr. Tendai, we are looking still at the All Africa Media Leaders Summit, and how they can work in collaboration, media stakeholders work in collaboration with maybe African governments to ensure a balance and a more conducive ecosystem that will permit the especially private media institutions to communicate for the development of the African continent. The media is a watchdog, and media institutions also engage in monitoring. And now, given the fact that most media organs in across the African continent, some of them fear that they don't have the leeway that can help them even to check some of those decisions taken by politicians that in turn impede the transformation or development of the continent, impede the foreign direct investment and other aspects that could help to portray the African continent in a positive perspective, showing the true realities on the ground. Now we are looking at the point of compromise or collaboration between media practitioners or media owners and the governments of various countries across the continent to bring a common and conducive ecosystem for practice. Dr. Tendai?
Sorry, I remain muted again. Yes, definitely so earlier on you asked me about what the key outcomes were in terms of declarations from the summit.
Absolutely.
And if I give you some of the top outcomes, the one was that we would join together, all Africa would join together with the development banks of Africa in order to create a respected African media company that will position the African news to the world. Another one was to create a repository of verified content that will allow for aggregation and lower costs of access to content that will become the epicenter of the ability to get information out there. A funded platform such as the APs and those who are funded by external organizations, but we will fund this from Africa. The third point that we looked at was a TAWS, which was a council that could come together and from a Pan-African point of view, look at the best interests and protect the best interests of journalists. Some are incarcerated in their states just for speaking the truth. And it's very difficult for the machinery within those countries to actually deal with that. So a TAWS that will allow from the protection of media rights and also a charter for disinformation. The last thing, which I think is of the utmost importance, Mr. Clifton Ellis mentioned the African media playing a critical role in development and also having the responsibility for illuminating all points of view and making sure that everything gets out there. But in order to do this, we need to respect the African media. We need to recognize and profile African media excellence. And one of the things that we did at the Media Summit was to have an Excellence Award, a great gala event that recognized lifetime achievement awards for people like Dr. Sam Amuka, who founded the Vanguard, people like Afif Ben Yedder, ICB Publications, who have done wonders, people like Mr. Patrick Kwako, who have done wonders for the news. We also need to celebrate that. And one of the things Dr. Adesina did say in his speech as well was that he would be behind that. He would make sure that people are celebrated and encouraged. Excellence is recognized. These are some of the most important things. We always look at what is the responsibility. They must do this, they must do that. But do we stand by? Do we wait for CNN to come and give us the African Media Awards? Why? we must celebrate ourselves. So, these are all part of forming a strong African media.
Indeed, a very strong aspect, which, if fully implemented, will actually change a lot across the process of information giving in Africa. Coming back to you, Professor LAEED, as an expert in information and communication, we understand that most of the models or policies are shaped by the proponents of communication, as highlighted by Ms. ELLIS. We actually contextualize. Now we're looking at the African media. So what are those peculiarities that can make the African media in the 21st century and in the years to come that will actually, present Africa the way it is without actually maybe copying the models proposed by other communication experts, which actually fit their context? How can we contextualize the African media and ensure communication for development in every sphere, particularly at the time that we are looking at the integration of the African continent, the historic free trade zone and other aspects? Because, when you look at the communication around these areas, you see the divergence, you see the discrepancies existing about between the countries. And now the peculiarities of an African media may probably have the potentiality to bridge the gaps and present Africa the way it is. So what are the stakes for the African media?
Thank you very much, Clarice, for the excellent question. Well, actually, the challenges are huge, are big, are so fantastic. And the media should be aware of what is decided for the continent, the future of the continent, whether it's about Agenda 2063 for prosper Africa, developed Africa, of course, human rights Africa. So also, in addition to this fantastic and promising Agenda 2063, we launched already 2 or 3 years ago this African Continental Free Trade Association. This is again a very revolutionary project that really will remove all the obstacles that enable Africa to take off the ground and to be a strong and efficient, with an efficient and strong economy. Then they have another, of course, major project. It's about the free movement of persons. So we expect in a few years there will be one single passport for the African people. And therefore, we have a lot of exchange of goods, of items, of persons. So this revolutionary project thought and developed and conceived by politicians at the African Union body, media should be aware and should take on by promoting this, because this is that's this kind of project, and very revolutionary one, will for sure remove all bad thinking, bad image of Africa in the world. Now, so many countries now, so many big countries are inviting Africa for different summit. I give you an example. We have summit between European Union and Africa, summit between, of course, Russia and Africa, China and Africa, USA and Africa, Japan and Africa, Korea and Africa. So many, Turkey and Africa. So there are so many countries in the world are considering how to invest and how to be present within the continent, because they knew this continent is full of, it has a lot of potential, whether human potential or mineral potential. So Africa, the media should be aware of the importance, should be promoting our own forces, our own capacity, and more on the top of that, we should think of an efficient business media model. What is it? It's not. There is no question of. There is no discrepancy or contradiction between private and public. On the contrary, both of them should work together, but bearing in mind the social responsibility of each of them. So that is to say, the media have to invest, have to be reflecting the reality of the ground, have to be close to people's worries, but also have to go in between the public and the leadership, between the governed and who are governing. So we should remove all these bad picture and stereotypes and question of manipulation and hegemony or monopoly. Now, Africa now is a continent of future. We moved from Afro-pessimism to Afro-optimism. There is a renaissance of Africa. I think we don't have to miss this opportunity, whether you are a journalist, whether you are a student in information, whether you are director, manager, whether you are a politician, whether you are a stockholder from social society, civil society, sorry. So it is important to say that we should now consider the media as the tool to revolutionize the approach towards Africa. Africa should reconquer, should reappropriate its legitimacy, its liberty, and its strength by its own people. I would say, if we say so many things, African people should be, African problem should be solved by Africans themselves. We should now say that to promote African media, it should be done by African journalists, African media professional. That's what we don't need any narrative from outside the continent, because as Dr. TENDAI said, we don't need any other company like CNN or other. We should have our own media, our African news, as it is the case in Oro News and the BBC and so forth. So we should think in terms of locally to promote local media as well, national media as well, territorial and continental media. African media has adopted so fantastic, so revolutionary project, but this project should be accompanied, that's what I want to stress, should be accompanied by a huge, very big and very promising media outlet. Thank you.
Indeed, it's about having a globally respected media platform for the continent Africa. Let me get back to you, Dr. TENDAI. You know, the question you responded to earlier on that accentuated on the declaration of the All Africa Media Leaders Summit and how they can work with the government. Now, there is an issue. We want to look at the availability of personalities, particularly political stakeholders, to comment to the African media organs. You know, wanting to write the real stories of Africa that will portray Africa in a positive perspective, like you've said, and the president of the African Development Bank highlighted. We also need stakeholders. And now, the role of the journalists and media organs, how can we manage to solve this issue that most of the times politicians or even stakeholders that have vital and valuable information that if the comment on African media platforms, it will help to also, continue, help the media to continue communicating for development and presenting the right stakes the way they are. So it's a whole lot of problem that you see with the African media and African journalists face, because you can see President talking freely with the so-called Western media, but it becomes difficult for an African media to come in contact with these major stakeholders that will help them to go well with their day-to-day activities of news giving and changing perspectives across Africa.
Yeah, I think I go back to the point I made about creating a level of protection and unity across African media, which transcends the borders and the political tensions and partisan kind of activities within countries. One of the things that the All Africa Summit has always tried to do is to close the gap between the media and the governments. We have always had the head of state sit in the room with African media leaders, the top editors, the owners of media across the continent, and talk face to face, which is something quite unique. We had President Macky Sall do that, President El Sebsi, we had the Prime Minister Haile Mariam of Ethiopia also speak directly to media. It's about creating that strong media that is able to speak truth to power, because I know I'm repeating myself, but going back to what I said, if the media is not financially strong and has to, play some kind of patronage on one side or the other, then we really are not going to be able to speak truth to power. So I think that the strengthening of the media houses is the most important thing in terms of capacity building, in terms of using technology, in terms of having a central news wire that carries all the news, that moves through without fear, without favor. That is the most important thing that we need to concentrate on, and we are working very hard to provide training and to provide that independent platform that is not that easy to squash, or I don't know what good word to use, to muzzle. We need to have open voices for Africa, and we do that by uniting as an African media, stronger together.
Indeed, stronger together. Now it brings us to the geopolitics of communication with you, Mr. ELLIS. We want to look at the geopolitics of communication and how it is impeding the objectiveness or fairness of media organs around the globe, and particularly how it is affecting the African continent. Dr. TENDAI quite mentioned that African media or media organizations need to be financially stable, and it's true, the media is a watchdog and it engages in information monitoring, and likewise government, and also we can attest that to an extent it is some sort of investment or business. But now it is good to analyze some of these geopolitical stakes that have to do with communication, and see how who finances or media financing actually affects the productivity of the media organ, and how can we handle this issue to ensure that we actually respect the normal norm of news giving and communication for development, rather than trying to create a greater sphere or scope for more business gains.
Thank you, Clarice. I would like to say that I commend you specifically for the journey that you've made in creating a space where we can meet together and have these types of conversation. So kudos to you, and kudos for the hard work that you've done. And I think that if somebody deserves to be recognized as what Dr. Tendai has been talking about, from this plan of launching a very centralized, Pan-African platform acknowledging the work of journalists, I believe that there needs to be the ones who are doing the grafting, the ones who are really starting, using their talents, using whatever resource that is available to them. There needs to be a way in which people like yourselves can tap into funding, because because I believe that it should be a multi-pronged strategy. It should not just be centralized. There has to be a place for decentralized media, because I use YouTube. You can go on YouTube and you can find a lot of Africans who are essentially commenting on the local issues. Even regional issues, if not continental African issues, and they are acquiring significant number of views. So it is, they may not have the centralized acknowledgement for their work through recognized institutions, but I can assure you they are very effective in disseminating information about what is happening on a local, and regional, etc. basis when it comes to Africa. So I do condone a multi-pronged strategy because we have to assess the risk of the centralized, very large institutions and them being co-opted and therefore start in the censoring process, because it happens. Nepotism is a real phenomenon. If a journalist starts, who represents, of course, the fourth estate, starts to rub shoulders with a president and all of these things, then before long, they're friends. And will that journalist be comfortable in writing a piece that is not so attractive? Because, after all, he's now my buddy. So I look into all of these things when the rubber hits the road, what is really going to take place? Yeah. Because the model that is created, it sounds wonderful and all of these things, but then without a constitution, without a set of fundamental rules to create an architecture that is going to preserve the divergence or the diversity, rather, of opinions that exist throughout. Even families can't agree, much less I can't agree anything in my own family, in my own house. Yeah. So how are we going to agree on even on the street level, on one street, much less a city or a province or a country, much less a continent of Africa with 1.2 billion people? Yeah. We have to understand there is a lot of opinions, and these opinions must have a platform, even if it's unpopular, for being to be vocalized, so that, because that is how you have checks and balances. Yeah. And citizens throughout Africa, they want their governments to be kept in check. They don't want to give them carte blanche and then to have a fourth estate that effectively becomes a propaganda arm of the actual government, which tends to happen. Go throughout Africa. You will see, whether it's South Africa, there are media supporting a more liberal agenda, and they're very, very much, partisan. Yeah. If you go to Zimbabwe, go across Africa, go to Nigeria, you will see that the big media are essentially in bed with a particular agenda, with a particular government, and therefore it's always a struggle for opposing politicians to then get a voice. And so what will happen to those opposition voices to an agenda? Will they have a platform for speaking? And that is why I'm being the devil's advocate here, not because I want to throw the spanner in the works of this wonderful vision, but I must say that every idea must be analyzed, and the risks must be analyzed. You do the SWOT, the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats. And then you say, as time goes to infinity, what will then happen if we were to have this model that does not have a constitution, which essentially, which emphasizes the need for free speech? And so this is really, I'm sorry, Clarice, for my divergence from your question, but I felt impressed on myself to kind of state, it's not because I want to be a contrarian, but I can see challenges ahead with this particular model.
Thank you. It's okay. The essence is to have an understanding of the stakes and see how we can address some of these impediments, some of these obstacles to a free media across the African continent. Still talking about what is suitable for the continent that will help to analyze. Professor LAEED, you may want to comment on probably the geopolitics of communication, being a communication, information and communication expert. and the issue of financing and how this has helped to maybe the real information given across the African continent that, for example, some pundits hold that most media organizations do not actually communicate for development, but rather communicate areas that suit their interest.
Well, I think what the African government overall should do, they should constitutionalize the concept of freedom of the press. That's what Algeria has done. And I think, therefore, nobody will come, any government will take over, will not, manipulate the freedom of the press. Overall, or throughout the whole world, well, now so many international governmental organizations, especially from Western countries, are depicting and distorting the truth of freedom of the press in Africa. And they are always, ranking them in the last row, in the ranking process. So I think what I want to say, first of all, we have to be very careful about the concept of freedom of the press. And of course, this freedom of the press concept, as you put it rightly in the very first beginning of this conference, in this webinar, we have to take into consideration the political, the economic, the social, and the cultural context in which the media operate. And therefore, we have to think in terms of contextualization and appropriateness. In other words, when it comes to geopolitics, now in the global map, in the global political map, Africa has a future. And this future is because we have 55 countries in Africa. We have over 1 billion inhabitants, without mentioning, as I said, the human potential. Beside the human potential, we have the material, we have natural resources, and so forth. And so many great powers in the world now are coming to Africa. They want to get profit from Africa, to benefit from Africa. So time has come for the African countries overall, and especially for politicians and decision makers, that they should give enough room, enough space for the media to check, to monitor, and to find out, to check and balance what is wrong, what is right. Don't give space, I would say, or the opportunity for international non-governmental organizations to interfere here because of lack of efficiency and lack of democracy and lack of liberty. That is why on the global map, on the global political map, as I said, Africa is the future, the continent of the future. And therefore, with our support, with the leadership from the African Union and all different bodies, whether at the continental level or regional level or within each government, we should give enough space, enough role, enough room for the media, and we should leave we should give the media this opportunity to reflect the reality. The media should work together and should be having this role of mediation, of going between the public, the audience, the society, and those who are in power. This is the only opportunity that closed the door for all media from the outside world which want to interfere. So it is important that Africa, the continent of Africa, is supposed to play a key role in the world affairs. And as I said so many times, what is happening now in the Middle East, in the war in Gaza, or in the war between Russia and of course Ukraine, Africa is having a third position. Africa is looking for multipolar system because the system, the political system, the international system we inherit from the Second World War has came to the end of its existence. a failure of non-governmental organization, the failure of international organization, whether it's United Nations, whether it's United Nations Security Council, or whether it is on the ground of finance, IMF, International Monetary Fund, whether World Bank. All these countries, all these institutions have failed to meet African expectations. And that's why I am so pleased, I am so excited to see the president of African Development Bank taking heavily, was present at the summit very heavily. And of course, I really appreciated what Dr. Akinwumi Adesina said. His involvement, his personal involvement is source of interest, source of optimism that the media will be really supportive of the development and enable the continent to take off the ground.
Indeed, the media has a bigger role, or have a bigger role to play as far as ensuring the total transformation of the African continent. It's about to help the shape the ideas, especially along the endowment or the how friendly doing business can be in Africa to boost investment. Now we continue to look at the place of the media. We cannot go without saying that the advent of the Africa media, where you see Africans owning media organizations, have actually helped to check some of the biases that we used to have on Africa. I would take the example of the liberation of former Ivorian President Laurent Gbagbo and Charles Blé Goudé, and of course these are some of the the accolades that we give to the African media. It was thanks to the numerous analytics and of course how the African media became very conversant with the lapses of these organizations, and we continue to see some of those the aspects happening in present day society, opening up the African mind. Now, to back to you, Dr. Tendai, to try to bring more or give more weight to the Africa media in solving some of these problems across Africa and changing its trajectory, especially in the economic perspective. What are those right parameters that we can use to, or the tools that can make up Africa's or information diplomacy or communication diplomacy in the times of multilateralism, to ensure that it brings Africa even more closer at the international arena?
Yeah, I think this conversation is incomplete without really looking at the role that technology can and will play. We've looked at technology in terms of the way that it has eroded business models and created monetization challenges for the media. But when we look at it as well, it is democratization on the positive side. One thing that we brought in the All Africa Media Leaders Summit was a metaverse. So everything that we did was projected on the metaverse. Anybody could join, anybody could attend, anyone could walk around the summit venue and listen to any of the deliberations that were there. President Ruto was unable to attend, but we had him attend anyway, because we created an avatar. Yeah. And he was in the room and was able to answer questions. So we just put him there. So, this is something that cannot be persecuted. One of our participants, Mr. Mamadou Touré from Ubuntu Tribe, has created something called the Mediaverse. And I believe that this is the way that Africa will connect, as you say, to the rest of the world on a very equal platform, because it allows for each person, anybody who is in media to enter into media and monetize whatever they have to put on that platform within certain parameters. This platform allows for total freedom of speech and protects the content creator. I know we have had cases, for example, you can use an example in Nigeria where they decided, okay, this whatever is being said on this platform is not in the best interest of the Nigerian government, therefore we are banning Twitter. Sorry, I can't call it X because I don't understand what X is. X doesn't make any sense to me, and someone must tell Elon Musk that it's Twitter. Little bird is good. Even Dr. Adesina said the bird is good. I agree. Anyway, so you can't ban Twitter. You can't ban a mediaverse. You can't ban a metaverse. And you don't need resources to be able to put on there. What you do need is to be able to follow the guidelines, as Mr. Ellis said, that allow you to make sure that you have fact-checked, that what you're saying is authentic and what you're saying is unbiased. And at the end of the day, you can then monetize on there. So at the end of the day, technology, I think Africa has often lagged in technology and then leapfrogged to the latest technology. And I'm hoping that this is, again, what we will do. We will leapfrog into a space where a lot of the borders become erased by technology. And, you know, this really now comes back down to the development of the continent. People, of course, we have the natural resources, we want investment, but in that investment coming in, we want to see development that we can get every single person, there's 1.2 billion people, connected to the internet. And that is where the democracy and development will really jettison.
And we need the scope as soon as possible so as to benefit from the global changes. Mr. Ellis, coming back to the point, we're still trying to understand, you know, some of the political rhetorics that we find behind the world of communication. I'm talking here about, you know, listening to all the analysis that you and the other expert have actually presented, patterning our topic for discussion. We want to try to look at those areas where we can actually bring about understanding or a compromise that will help transcend all that has been said theoretically into, you know, living the practicality of it. And I think that's where the objective is made. Now, you know, we're talking about the plurality of the media, and we're projecting Africa at the international arena in, you know, its multipolarity. Now, the fact that, you know, to be able to derail, you know, the audience or the population from getting the right information, you find government actually censoring some media organs, even putting a ban. For example, let me take a simple case which actually is out of the African continent, but we're looking at the conflict between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. Countries in Europe, particularly, you know, Poland and other areas, countries in, especially in the European Union, in their respective nations, you understand that there is some sort of media censorship or banning that block or set a block or an obstacle for the population to abreast the real situation on the ground. How can we actually maybe contextualize this in the aspect of Africa and see how, when such maybe decisions taken by governments go a long way to distort the information that the population actually have, or the ideas pertaining the real stake on the ground, and how is this affecting the population in the decision making, and even in the portraying the continent in a positive way?
I think the war between Russia and Ukraine is a clear case where you have governments who want to hide things, you know, and it's not new. Governments like to hide, you know, the things that they do in which they know the public will not support. Because I'm sure if these countries in Europe and in the US had represented the the truth about the Russian-Ukrainian conflict and bring it back to its original inception, 2014. Viktor Yanukovych was toppled by the CIA. So it was a putsch, it was a coup d'etat. And so, they had to hide this because they had an agenda. And this is a clear example that whenever you have governments that they have, sponsors who want to undertake certain operations that will not receive significant support from their local population, they must hide the truth. And so this is something that we need to learn from any system that we implement in Africa. We must understand the risks that exist, that there will be parties or very powerful individuals that would want to co-opt. And that is why you need to have a constitution. And I keep on emphasizing on this because you need to have clear rules which determines exactly the parameters of how things go through the centralized institution, how it is filtered, how the narrative, and I use the word narrative because oftentimes it's neither black nor white, but gray. And, yet it can be created in a way that represents a black and white narrative. And so the Ukrainian conflict is rather gray. Well, it's turning towards black, unfortunately, in terms of the level of individuals that are dying, there, and my heart reaches out to them and to the suffering individuals there. But it's a conflict that could have been resolved a long time ago if there were a free and fair representation by the Western media, so that the agreement that they had arrived at, and I can't remember exactly, the Minsk agreement, which essentially would have prevented the conflict and would have ensured that the Donbas would have become autonomous or semi-autonomous and therefore be able to vote through a referendum on whether or not they wanted to be a part of Kiev or to even be a part of Russia, which of course the people there are majority Russians ethnically. So unfortunately, we have these threats to the co-opting of the media to launch narratives or to twist the truth, manipulate the truth, not giving balanced and fair information about really what is happening from all the sides. And so this is a risk that must be taken into consideration as we think about what architecture do we really want. I'm an advocate. I'm an information. I believe that the free market, and we should not insult people's intelligence to decipher the truth. Yeah. And to say that we want to fact check individuals. I think even if you were to go and look at the fact checkers themselves are essentially controlled by individuals who would want to kind of twist really into a more favorable narrative that suits their interest. And so we have to be very careful. I think that in a time in which we've seen centralized institutions failing, that Dr. ZAGHLAMI mentioned earlier, the IMF has failed, centralized institution. Why it's failed? Because it didn't have the right architecture, it didn't have the right constitution. The IMF and the UN failed. The World Bank has failed. I mean, the WHO has failed. The WTO has failed. All of those huge centralized institutions have failed, and they have deviated, I would say, from objectively representing their core principles, because there was not the checks and balances that was able to keep them in line. And so these are the things that I need to mention and emphasize on. I believe in the free market, and I'll close here. The free market of information, like the free market of economy, the free market of what is considered to be money, whether it's a note, banknote, or it's gold, or it's silver, or it is something else. Africa needs to look on the complete menu and make a complete evaluation on the basis of sound understanding of the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats. And based on those things, create a constitution that will allow it to implement the right model. And this requires a lot more discussion and a lot more thrashing out. And thank you for, starting out in this debate here.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Elisa. Let's end with you, Professor LAEED, by looking at the place of the African youth in championing this cause now in transforming, of course, the media. What do you think is the place of the younger generation actively involved in championing the cause? Coming back to what Dr. Tendai said, using the maybe social media platforms, do you think in this world of communication that the youth in Africa particularly is using the ecosystem positively that can help even to maybe promote positive ideas and drive progressive change within the African continent that will lead to total transformation? Please, just a few minutes. We're almost concluding.
Yes, Clarice. I think to conclude, younger generation, African young generation, should be careful about the danger of being cheated by media. Disinformation is there. So fake news are there, manipulation are there. And now with the widespread of digital media and social media, of course, you have also to have a say and to make sure.
You're muted, please.
Oh, you're muted.
Professor LAEED, please, you're muted. We can't hear you. Professor LAEED? Please, can you unmute yourself? We can hear you. Your mic, pardon, I beg your pardon.
There was a disconnection from a phone call. Sorry, Clarice. So what I want to say, social media, we should reappropriate all sorts of media, whether it is social media, whether digital media, whether conventional media. We should be present there. We should produce our own material, our own set of material, our own media. We don't have to consume other countries' media, especially as we have already agreed, all of us, the three of us. The system we inherit from the Second World War II has finished, has come to the end. Now Africa is now it has recovered its own independence, it has recovered its own sovereignty, and the sovereignty does not mean anything if we don't have a good command of our decision, whether it's in finance, whether it's in media. And I think I am so pleased and so delighted that Dr. Adesina have paved the way for the future of generation. And of course, he give us really a matter of what his discourse last 2 or 3 days or 4 in Kenya and Nairobi has give us a source of matter of optimism. And really for that, I am grateful to him and to all people and our friends and colleagues from the media who attended last week. Of course, gathering meeting in Nairobi are aware because they have already set up the framework for the next move, the next steps. And I think young generation have to consider that they have their own. They should reconquer their future in their hands, decide by themselves, and don't expect anymore that they will be instructed from outside the continent. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor LAEED. And of course, this is taking us to the end of the program. I wish to appreciate you, particularly Dr. Tendai Mia, who joined from Zimbabwe. And for the first time on For You Media Africa, it was a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Tendai. Thank you, Mr. CLIFTON ELLIS. See you one day, inshallah. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Who joined us live from the United Kingdom. Thank you so much, sir, for your great insight topic for discussion. We extend gratitude to our viewers out there and appreciate you for trusting the Pan-African Television. It's about charting the African cause. It's about ensuring that we present the real stakes or situation across Africa, and of course making the continent to have a greater share when it comes to taking decisions at the global level. Thank you to the technical crew for ensuring the smooth run of the program. While I leave you in the company of transmissions and for you media, always have in mind that it is another view of the world.